Welcome back to another episode of Survivor Worldwide. The crew is back here today to talk about Survivor South Africa Immunity Island episode 1. And this is the first episode of Survivor that we've seen in such a long off season. Riley, how was it for you? What did you think of it?
Oh, yeah, so brilliant to have Survivor back on our screen. So many exciting characters, a really exciting twist with Immunity Island, lots to unpack here. I can't tell you how glad I am to have Survivor back, Chris. I was waiting so long since last year to see this season, and now it's finally on air. We got everything we asked for and more, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. And, for me, coming into this season, there was so much anticipation, so much hype. It's probably the most I've ever seen anybody talk about Survivor South Africa, and being a South African myself, I was obviously very proud about that. And I've had people from Canada, people from the UK, people from the US, different people reaching out to me to say, how do we watch this? And guys, if you're listening to this, I've passed that feedback on to Mnet directly as well. And I've said to them, you guys have got to keep expanding into other regions. There is a real market out there for people who want to watch this show and they want to support the show. They don't want to watch it via illegal ways. So if you can get into platforms in the States, if you can get into platforms in the Canadian sector and also in the UK, people will follow it. So really, really positive hype around it. Really excited to talk about this season, Riley. And, we get this episode starting right off the bat with all of the different castaways walking in and they're meeting each other for the first time. And there's a lot of interesting observations that were made in this section. For me, one of the interesting observations here is Anesu very early on saying that Sean's someone that takes off his top. He wants to be noticed and that he's in shape and he's physically pretty good. That was one. And then the second one probably that stood out for me was the one where Santoni, sort of points out that, or was it Santoni? I can't remember. I think it was Santoni who said that Marisha looks like the female version of He-Man, which I found quite funny because Marisha is built like a tank.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, plenty of exciting observations. And Amy as well saying that there's lots of things to look out for in the Eastern Cape, snakes, spiders, and fellow tribe mates. So yeah, it's certainly exciting to see all these different characters, and it's a very diverse group as well. Obviously, a lot of different people from different backgrounds. So to have that and to see their first impressions of everyone is really exciting.
Yeah, 100%. Now, Riley, we did say we were going to have a beer to celebrate that Survivor is finally back in our screens. I've got my spates here. I'll do a virtual clink with you, and we'll make sure to take our first sip to celebrate Survivor being back on air here. So yeah, very, very happy to talk about it today. One of the really cool things about this episode that I really enjoyed, Riley, is that right from the start, we're going to throw some random elements into this Survivor season by having the tribe be randomly selected on our screens. It's something that I really enjoy. I personally hate it when we see tribes pre-selected and we don't know how they selected these tribes. Was it production that cleverly put these people together? They tried to manipulate things in a certain way before the game even started, or is it something that's organically going to happen within the season? And in this season, we get that random tribe pick that happens. What did you think of that? And are you a fan of this, or do you prefer for it to be pre-selected coming into the season?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a fan of it. I mean, Survivor is about adjusting to different people from different walks of life. I mean, if production really sets up tribes, like what we saw in the previous season, where some people knew each other and that created conflict, by having a random draw, obviously everyone has an equal chance to, have a good beginning. You might get a bad draw, like what we saw when it came to drawing out the buffs there. But ultimately, it makes it more fair on everyone else. Just like at the tribe swap, you get a random draw. It really is just luck. And I think it's something I'd like to see more in other versions of the show. I understand why production do it, obviously, because they want certain characters interacting with others. But I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's going to have to interact with each other at some point. So to really throw everyone in a tribe together and, not have too much intervention, I really liked it.
Yeah, 100%. And we get two tribes here. We've got the Zamba tribe and we've got the Vuna tribe. And Zamba is going to be green, Vuna is going to be orange. It is kind of funny to see green and orange, especially being in a South African theme season when we've got the green and gold being our national rugby team, and a lot of our sports teams don the green and gold as well. And I do believe, and I don't sort of quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure Zamba and Vuna would be also something that is a throwback to the South African themed season that this is, to probably some previous South African tribal names or something like that as well. It sounded very African to me when I saw those names come up. Now, we early on here, we find out, Riley, that Paul thinks that he's on the cricket team, and he thinks that the other team there is the rugby team. What did you think of the breakdown here on these players being in these two different tribes?
I mean, he was really right in that sense. You get someone like Marisha, who, as Santini described her as being the female He-Man, and other guys in that tribe like Renier and Anella and Sean and Jason. These really big dudes, and obviously you look at Vuna, who have some of the older women who might not be as perceived as strong in challenges, and some of the smaller guys as well. So I think. Yeah, Paul certainly was right in his assessment here. It does look like Zamba are going to be the physically dominant tribe in this early stage, and that Vuna are really playing catch up at the moment. I really do like that comparison that Paul made there, with Zamba being the rugby tribe and Vuna being the tennis tribe. It really does create an early rivalry as well. And what we saw was Chorizo in particular was very unhappy with her standing in the tribe, because she recognized that everyone around her was really strong, really buff, these athletic types, and she might not fit in as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you look at these two tribes, I didn't realize that Paul was as tiny and as short as he is, because he looks like he's got quite a bit of muscle to him as well, but he's actually quite tiny, and I don't think Kieran and Tyson are the biggest guys either. So a lot of the sort of brunt and when it comes to the strength in that tribe is probably going to have to go to someone like a Chappies in that tribe. But like we know in Survivor, Riley, it doesn't always matter physically if you're the biggest. You know, it's kind of funny because Australia's got the brains versus brawn theme that's going to come out in a couple of months from now, and in some ways this is almost the brains versus brawn theme, even though they didn't on purpose go into this season, obviously with the random pick to have the tribe selected in that way, but or David versus Goliath, or whatever you want to call it. But we know that at the end of the day, you know, any tribe can actually win when it comes to Survivor, because there's so many different elements that goes into the game of Survivor, and it's not just physically dominant. You have to be mentally strong. You have to be someone that's cool under pressure when you're doing challenges and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how long we get these two tribes sticking together before we see some swaps and things like that happening in there, which again is going to muddy the water, and it's going to make different things happen at that point. One of the funny things here for me is we get to hear a little bit about Tyson, and Tyson says that, you know, he would rather die than lose at anything in life. So clearly he's going to go very hard in this game. And in the whole preseason, I don't think anybody noticed the fact that he had a smiley face with the $2 signs for eyes on his shirt there. And it is quite funny. You know, he said he needs to let people know what his priorities is going into the game. It's there to get the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does come across as a great guy. I was really impressed by Tyson's opening in this episode. He did get a lot of content, particularly talking about interactions with other tribe mates, which we'll get into later there. But he does seem like someone that's certainly exciting. Obviously, in our draft, I picked him toward the end, but I do view him as someone that, you know, could go deep in the game. All these players look very exciting to see how they go. I mean, a very diverse group, and it does look like, yeah, although Vuna aren't as strong or perceived as being as strong as Zamba, they certainly could match it with Zamba as well.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. When I looked at how the tribe sort of played out, I felt like a lot of that diversity ended up going to Vuna, and it's kind of not on purpose. It ended up being like a lot more players of color were in Vuna compared to Zamba, and it's interesting to see how those dynamics are going to work cross tribal when they start getting into different things there. But we get this early stage of the game, and we also find out here, Riley, that there is going to be a challenge now for them to go and get some supplies and resources for their tribe. But we all know as Survivor fans that, you know, there's going to probably be an advantage out there. The need is someone that immediately is onto the fact that he's going to have to look out for something extra while he's out there. But Nico also makes it very clear from the start that there's going to be a hidden immunity necklace that someone can get. And Dino's got his eyes set on that. What did you think of this passage of play? And also, just before you go into it, there was this really funny moment with Pinty absolutely clotheslining Nicole and running her out of the ground there. And it kind of looked like Pinty should have been on the rugby team as well.
And Nicole didn't. Sorry, Nico didn't even comment on it. I was
Yeah.
shocked that he didn't say Nicole's gone on the ground. She's down. But no, I mean, yeah, it was great to see. Everyone obviously running into the woods, picking up all these supplies. And yeah, ultimately, Dino has about 10 seconds left until the end of the challenge, and he decides to go for the immunity necklace. I think it's a pretty dumb move, but you know what? I mean, hey, he got it in the end, and he managed to deflect that target. And obviously, at the end there, with a couple of seconds remaining, he pointed out to Paul where the immunity necklace was. Paul didn't get there in the end, but then that does create at least some sort of bond across tribes as well. So I think it was sort of a dumb move to paint that target on yourself this early in the game, but I feel like it's something that it only protects him for one tribal council, so I don't think people will perceive it to be as big of a threat as it might be made out to be.
No, I mean, I didn't completely mark him off for that specific move. Like, I understand what you're saying. You don't unnecessarily want to put a target on your back this early in the game and show that you're a gamer. But when you look at those tribes, and let's just bring them back up here again, when you look at the guys, who's the guy here that looks the least athletic out of all of them? It is probably going to be a Dino in this group if you looked at Anela, Ranir, Sean, and Jason. So I feel like in that sense, probably he felt like maybe there's going to be a bit of pressure on him if he didn't go for that immunity necklace, that people might want to vote against him. I don't think it would have been him regardless. I do still think Teriso would have probably been the person that's at the most risk, but you also get that random element of the immunity island being thrown into the game, which Nico explains to the tribe here early on. So obviously, knowing there's this random element of immunity island, knowing that there's a definite immunity necklace up there for grabs that you can grab prior to going to the tribal council, I do think the game move here is to go for it. But I think that we'll obviously go into Dino's game as we progress, because Dino goes back into camp here and he tells his campmates immediately, listen, guys, I went for it. There was nothing else left on the course. It was the last thing I could do, so I thought I might as well go for it. So I thought him owning up to it and fessing up about it in camp and sort of selling it in that way, it made sense. But we're going to see that this is going to become a habit with Dino having to go back and apologize to his tribe quite a bit throughout the episode.
Yeah, which is certainly a dangerous thing. But I mean, on the opposite spectrum, you had Renier, who found that tribe advantage early on when finding supplies, and Nico really had to pry it out of him to actually reveal it, because I think he was skeptical to pull it out and say, yeah, I found this advantage, because it does show him as a game player early on. But I think by delaying in that, again, it probably paints a little bit of a target on his back. Teriso said in the confessional there that she wasn't as trusting of Renier anymore because he was reluctant to reveal that advantage. But it does obviously work out in Zamba's favor, as they get a reward from Cape Union Mart with sleeping bags, mattresses, and mosquito nets. A great start to the game. Lots of comfort there. That's obviously going to make their lives a lot easier.
I think the mosquito net, especially for the guys living out there, because just knowing how many mosquitoes are out in Africa, it can be quite an annoyance there if you're sleeping at night and you're getting bitten by those things. We've seen some Survivor seasons where people have been able, where they've got all these bug bites and mosquitoes and things on them there. I think that would have been something that really would have helped them there, because, I mean, the sleeping bag, it's like one sleeping bag. Who gets to use it? Yeah. Do they do sharesies on it, or like do rock, paper, scissors and say, hey, tonight you get the sleeping bag, tomorrow you get it? So I didn't really see the point in that, but I think the mosquito net, if it's big enough to be used for the whole camp, is not bad. But overall, Riley, I actually feel like it's a really troll advantage, because Ranira's gone out there and has put his neck on the line trying to find this advantage, which he thinks is going to be a solo advantage for himself in the game, but then it ends up being something for the camp, like you said. So he's unnecessarily played his hand, showing that he's quite observant. And Teriso, throughout this whole episode, is going to be someone, I feel like I don't know if there's probably more introverts in that Zamba tribe, but I feel like she's probably the most introverted person and the most observant person sitting on the sidelines, sort of reading the social dynamics and seeing where people are going and how the alliances shake out. So a very good read here from her early on in the game. I also wanted to mention here, just before we go into them going back to camp, Chappie's very early on says that, he's trying to contain himself and that it's very difficult for him because you can just see energy is oozing out of him. He says he wants to just strip naked and run around immediately, which gets a great reaction from some of the girls, and especially Nico, who seemed quite surprised by that and didn't know how to take it. I don't remember if there's ever been somebody running around naked on Survivor South Africa, but I don't feel like it's a very Survivor South Africa thing to do. So it definitely caught a few people off guard.
It is a very Survivor thing to do, though. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
harking back to Richard Hatch in season one. But yeah, and we did see some of that later. It is fun to see those sort of antics and people really being themselves on Survivor is something I enjoy. And I mean, if it feels comfortable and no one else is uncomfortable with it, then so be it. Do whatever you want. But yeah, really exciting to see him being himself, and he does seem like a very excitable bloke as well, chappies. I came into the season looking at him and thinking he's sort of just very focused on being buff and really exerting himself in physical challenges. But he did prove to be a very social player as well, as we saw early on.
So Logan is one of our international listeners, and Logan, we're all very happy to have Survivor back on our screens as well, and we feel like this first episode definitely delivered. I also wanted to say here that Chappie's Riley, he says that he's welcoming us to his journey on winning the show. So it's really funny to see this. And I mean, Chappies is going to be all over the place. I'm also playing the Fantasy Survivor Tribe Leagues against a bunch of other players online. And I've got Chappies in my team. And I can tell you, he scored a lot of points for me in this first one because of all the confessionals and just being such a dominant character throughout the whole episode. Now, we go back into the camp section, and they need to start building camp. And Jason immediately here tells everyone that he is a structural engineer, and he says that he didn't want to tell people in camp that that is his job because he knew that he would probably get the responsibility of building the camp. And he realizes that it's not a good thing to always be a leader and Survivor this early on, because when you're at a high, you can only go down from here. He did go into a little bit more of why he told people that he was a structural engineer. There was things that wasn't shown on the TV show in regards to why he made that clear. So I won't go on into that on here. We will have the exit interview with Jason available tomorrow. So in about 24 hours, if you come back to listen to that, he will tell you a little bit of behind the scenes of why he needed to make people aware that he's a structural engineer. But this obviously means that he now becomes the person that's going to have to build the shelter here. Hey, Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does take on that responsibility. I don't think it's a bad thing for Jason, though, because he doesn't seem like a very domineering personality, whereas someone like Sean certainly came across as being quite dominant. And Renier sort of recognized and really poked at Jason for realizing that Jason didn't want to take on the role, but he took it on. And, while he was trying to lead the tribe, he was also trying to deflect the shield off him as well, which I thought was really interesting, that people knew that he felt threatened by taking on that leadership role. But I think he did sort of assimilate himself well in the tribe by revealing that he was a structural engineer. And certainly when it came to building the shelter, it did look a lot better than Vuna's shelter there as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, they don't get to the point where they finish the whole shelter because there was a bit of work that went into it, but at least they were able to go and sleep underneath it and stay dry to a certain degree. But if you look at Vuna, I think they were getting rained on the whole night and they didn't have any cover from the elements in that first night. But you're right, Jason does get an in here because we see very early on here that Jason is talking to Anella, he's talking to Renier. Someone like Anella is saying that, listen, Jason and Renier and Anella, they're going to go with Amy, Marisha, and Nicole in an alliance here early on. And Dino is someone that they see as a tag-along that will tag into that alliance, but he's not necessarily core. But Jason is starting this episode at a very powerful and high position where everybody seems to be trusting him. Teresa brings this up as well when Jason puts his hand up to go and do the fire challenge. She says that clearly that means that he's someone that they trust. They wouldn't take someone to go there and potentially do this and then sort of risk the fact that there might be more going on and he's going to come back and not tell them about that. So I feel like he's at a very high here. But the early stages here, how we're seeing these dynamics form and people talking, and I do want to touch on one thing actually, just as I'm talking through it, is the point where they started doing all these introductions. We only really saw the introduction for Jason being a structural engineer, and then we saw Nicole say that she lives in Stellenbosch and that she's from a horse farm. Now, I can tell you as someone who is from that part of that neck of the woods in Cape Town, South Africa, that in Stellenbosch, people who have farms around that area, they're quite well off. Like, these are pretty rich people. So I feel like her telling her tribe mates that she's from Stellenbosch and she's from a farm, at some point that could come back to bite her in the butt. Even if she makes the final, people might look at her and say, this is someone that comes from money. She does look like a poppy, like she says, like a Barbie doll, well manicured, looks after herself. That could paint a little bit of a target. But in the early stages here, Nicole is in a in a pretty tight alliance here with Marisha and Amy. And I kind of looked at those three and I thought, could this be almost like we just saw with champions versus contenders, where there were very tight three girl alliance? Is that kind of what's starting to brew here with some of the guys coming in and sort of tagging along to that, but those three being the main core three within it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, but obviously we saw that, Kihan and Sean made a massive Survivor faux pas. They started going through all the fruit, all the rice, looking for the secret flint, or perhaps a hidden immunity idol clue if they could find it. And obviously they did it right in front of everyone. I understand that you want to be upfront and honest and say you're looking for the secret flint, but it really does put a target on their backs. I mean, you don't go snooping around on day one for a hidden immunity idol clue, even if you say you're not doing so. So that really put a target on their back. And obviously Amy recognized that, and she used that as leverage to bring in Smash, Jason, Renier, Dino, and then obviously they brought in Marisha and Nicole as well, who were a tight twosome there. So it's really setting Kihan and Sean up as the outsiders. Obviously, Teresa hasn't been able to create any bonds at this stage in the game. And that seven really seems very set, at least early on in the game here, going into the first fire-making challenge. They seem very strong together. I did really like Amy's role here. She does seem to be very perceptive and looking at what other people are doing. And she seems like someone that's really trying to set plans in motion and create these alliances. So I thought Amy really was one of the standouts from this early Zamba tribe, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, how wrong was I with Amy and Nicole in my preseason assessment, where I said these are going to be two dominating females that are not going to want to work together? But like we kind of see in Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets, you also get Nicole and Steffi in that season working together, and they're two very dominant female characters. So sometimes, if they work together, it can go well. But it's early days, so let's see what happens as they go. But I do feel like from what I saw, both Nicole and Amy seemed a lot more relaxed compared to what I thought they were going to be coming in. I thought they were going to be a bit more domineering. Marisha seems like the very strong personality female, probably leader of that group in some degrees. We probably didn't see much of her sort of leading it in the sense of strategy, but I think just in the sheer sort of set of presence and who she is, being a strong woman, I think she's kind of the one that they will lean on for that wisdom and advice, if that makes sense. And I do think she's the oldest of the three. Sorry, Marisha, for talking about your age here, but I feel like they would naturally just gravitate towards her and take some direction there. But you're right, Amy, for me, she comes across as the person here that is extremely observant. I feel like she's a snake in the grass. The big question here is, now at the end of this, and I know we're jumping a little bit all over the place, but I'm afraid that I'll forget to ask you this question later on, Riley. At the end of this, Anella kind of makes Sean aware that, the target was on your back the whole time because someone saw you do this, and look through the rice, and they thought that you were looking for an idol. And does it at some point reach sort of Sean's ears that Amy was the one who put that target on him? And how does that change the game up? Because Sean is at the bottom at this stage. But what I like about this season is that we have got tribes of 10 opposed to the smaller tribes like we had, I think it was 6 or 7 in the previous season. I feel like in tribes of 10, a lot of things can change. Just because there's a dominant 6 now, there's a lot of room for movement and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily say Sean is completely out here. There could still be a tribe swap that happens. There's a lot of things that can happen. And, is that going to count against her? I've liked what I've seen so far from her this episode, and I think she's done everything right. I just, for her sake, hope that Sean doesn't find out, because I do think Sean is a very headstrong player and clearly someone that is going to throw a lot of mud at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, although, and we'll get into this later when we discuss Tribal Council, Sean really seems like a very full-on player. He really, not so much imploded, but made sure that everyone knew how he felt and that he was on the bottom at Tribal Council. He really was scrambling. I'm not sure that after Tribal Council, and we'll see in the next episode, whether people can actually trust him and whether they want to work with him. Obviously, it's only day 3 at this point, so nothing is set in stone at all. I mean, you could be allies with someone on day 1 and not have anything to do with them for the rest of the game. There's so much more to go in the game here, but at this stage, I think Amy's position is pretty safe with Dino, Marisha, and Nicole in particular. I think those 4 are really strong together. And Renier also seems to be quite close with Dino as well. I'm pretty set on this 6 as being the dominating alliance early on in this game. But again, Immunity Island comes into play, and obviously tribe talks as well are always a possibility. So there are plenty of moving parts here. And with Survivor, it's always unpredictable. But I think early on, Sean seems to be on the outs here at this Samba tribe with Kihan as well. Certainly see how that shakes up. In the next couple of episodes will be interesting.
Yeah, and just before we move on here to Vuna, because we haven't spoken about them yet, Teriso is another person there that you shouldn't forget is kind of on the outside, and she's sort of sitting on the sidelines quite a bit and doesn't look like she's being included in a lot of the conversations. So I do think that this tribe is quite volatile because, I don't want to go into the tribal council thing yet. Let's talk about tribal council when tribal council comes up. Let's move into Vuna at this point. So when you look at Vuna, someone that impressed me immensely, and it's someone that you had very highly rated coming into the season. Excuse me. In fact, you had him ranked, I think it was your second guy pick,
second male pick
as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So Kiran, for me, and we'll talk about who we think played the best game towards the end of this podcast, but Kiran for me is a contender for having played the best game up until this point. He goes into this and he is making alliances with a lot of people. He realizes that he doesn't want to be the center of the tribe. He doesn't want to be the leader. He's happy to move with the group, but he's going to work in the shadows and he's going to talk to the people that he wants to talk to. Like he creates that connection with Tyson because they both are into football. He talks to Anesu because Anesu and him, they kind of know each other from varsity university days. He's aware that she's a doctor, but he said, I'm not going to push the subject at this point. And he's kind of moving in the shadows and making a lot of alliances here. I'm liking what I'm seeing from Tyson as well. Tyson, one of the things for me about Tyson Riley that really surprised me is that, his deep voice that he's got, like he's just got this gravitas in his voice. I feel like people are going to trust him more than what they would trust a normal 21-year-old or 24-year-old. Because one of the fears I had for Tyson coming into this season was that he was the youngest guy coming into this season, and will anybody listen to him and will he have any pull? But I feel like the way he carries himself and the way that he speaks and the gravitas of that voice of his, I feel like people are going to trust him more and they're going to think he's older than he is. He comes across as being 28 or 30 already.
Yeah, well, I don't think the other benefit there is that a lot of the cast are quite young as well. It's a very young age group, so obviously they're going to interact with each other. And I believe Kieran and Tyson are around the same age there, as most of the tribe are. But someone that really, really impressed me was Anesu. And obviously, I think she was your first or second female pick. I think maybe even your first female pick. And she really was in all sorts of different alliances, creating strong bonds. When I first saw her at the beginning, I didn't realize she would be that level-headed, that calm. And it really, that's really what you want in the game of Survivor.
You called her Nora, didn't you? You called her Nora.
You were the one that said Nora, I think.
No.
But no, I think we were comparing her in terms of that yoga sort of instructor. But certainly to see how what I did say in the preseason was that Water and Anesu might clash. But it seems as though they knew each other already and they were very much connected and on the same page and not willing to tell everyone what connection they had. And in fact, Anesu said, all right, let's stick with the story that you're a yoga instructor. Let's not mention that I am. And then that way we'll eliminate any chance of people thinking that we know each other.
Well, I'm going to definitely. I'm hoping someone goes back and roll back the tape on the Anesu thing that we talked about, because I'm pretty sure it was either Nora or Debbie Wanner or somebody like that you called her. But I didn't get that same read from her from the start. I wouldn't have picked her that high if I thought she was going to be like either one of those two. From the start, I said I feel she gives me a lot of good energy, which again, when someone radiates the type of good energy, it's funny, I sound like a yogi because apparently, orange is the color of creativity and it's all about good energy. Yeah. But, when it comes to it, I feel like when you feel that energy through the camera and you can just see how she talks and that smile that she has, she's got a bright, calming personality, and I can see why a lot of people are trusting her this early in the season and want to have her in with their alliance because she seems really grounded. It's early days still. The one thing that makes me fearful of her position in the game, Riley, is that Warda knows that she's a doctor. Kiran knows that she's a doctor. I feel like that could come back to bite her at some point in the game, because we do know that people get hurt by people not telling them the full truths in a game such as Survivor. So if at a later stage it comes out that she's a doctor and she didn't tell anyone in day 21 or something like that, that could be the thing that actually tanks her game. So I do feel like, as hard as it is, honesty sometimes is the best policy. Dino does it. He maybe does it a little bit too much this episode by going back and constantly having to apologize. But I feel like the beginning, because what real benefits is there for you as a doctor in the game? For me, yes, okay, they say you get paid decently, I guess, but people that are doctors can still win the game. I don't see why. That's not like it's a massively strategic job or something like that. It's not like they're saying they're a cop. We know that cops at this point have got a pretty good hit rate when it comes to the US Survivor, at least. But yeah, like I said, for me, I feel like that could potentially come back to bite her at a later stage. But you're right. There's a lot of different allegiances being formed here. And it's quite interesting because Nesu literally talks to every single person. She even has a conversation with Chappies, which was quite surprising. And let's move into Chappies. Chappies here, he's starting to try and get a fire going. He says that it's a lot easier to get smoke than it is to actually get a fire. And he's got Pinty there with him trying to help him. And him and Pinty are seen as connecting early here in the game, going down to the beach, relaxing. Pinty and him talks, and Pinty says, listen, you're someone I would like to work with long-term, and you're someone I get a good energy from. And Chappies as well, he thinks that, Pinty comes across as being very trustworthy. I like this alliance, Riley. I think that for you to do well in Survivor, you need to connect with people that are not like you. And I think Pinty and him, they are from what we've seen in the first episode, very different personalities. They could connect with different people within the tribe. I do sadly think, though, that a lot of people are going to pick those two working together because they seem to hang out a lot in camp. But I do think that it could be a very lethal alliance. And I'm hoping that we get to see them go quite deep, because for me, the more Pinty and the more Chappies, especially, I see on my screen this season, I think the happier I'm going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find something that is really interesting is there are so many different alliances here that when it comes to Tribal Council, I'm not sure how it's going to shake out. Obviously, there's still a long way to go until they go to the next tribal, at least 3 more days if they lose the next community challenge. But really, it seems that there's about 8 people that are in this alliance, and I think it's only Paul and Santani that, at least from this episode, we didn't see them forming any strong alliances. It seems that Anasu and Kieran in particular are the ones that are really in the middle there and almost have alliances with just about everyone here. Pinty and Chappies are a really interesting combination. Another one that we saw was Wada and Kieran as well coming together. So lots of different people from different backgrounds. And again, this is what I love so much about Survivor. And the way this random draw was made is that we see all sorts of different people all coming together. And seeing how they interact, it was really interesting to see. But at this stage on the Vuna tribe, it certainly seems that Kieran and Anasu are the dominant forces, and Chappies really seems to be taking on a leadership role here, as we saw with him trying to make the fire there early on.
Yeah, but it was quite interesting when they were around camp, when it came to who was going to take the lead in trying to build the shelter. I believe Mike Laws was one of the guys that was giving a lot of input on how to do that, which I was quite surprised, because I didn't think he was going to be someone that would want to step up to be almost like a dominant leadership type of figure in those camp building stages. One of the things I wanted to mention here as well, as we move on to the next section, is we get to the point where they have to nominate someone in both tribes to go and make a fire. And there's a fire challenge that's going to come up here. And I'm not surprised by the fact that they nominate Chappies, because obviously he seems to be someone that's always going to put his hand up for anything. He wants to go balls to the wall, play the game that way. And they go and choose Jason from the other side, which to me, I feel like Jason needed to cool it at this stage, because he already took lead in building the shelter, but he kind of put his hand up to say, I've done fire before, I'll go do it. I feel like that probably is a little bit of a cross. I don't know how much it ultimately costed. I don't think it is the thing that costed him his spot in the game ultimately, but obviously he just kept piling that responsibility on himself here in the early days for this episode. We get Chappies and Jason going there to go and do this fire challenge, and Chappies plays it up and he says, hey, listen, this is just going to be a nice bonus cherry on the cake, but we've already had a fire since last night. And Jason doesn't want to hear anything about it, and he calls him on his bluff here, which I thought was a really great TV moment. What did you think of this challenge? Do you like the fact that we do a fire challenge this early in the season to get fire? Do you like this kind of mix-up that we're seeing here? And how do you think this is going to affect the game for these two guys now that people know they're good at making fire, especially since we know that can be an important thing in a game such as Survivor?
Well, I think it certainly didn't advantage or disadvantage Jason or Chappies anyway, really, because what we saw when Chappies came back to camp is Tyson was questioning whether there was another layer on top of that. And obviously with Jason, we saw that I think people were understanding that he didn't win, and it didn't paint too much of a target on his back. It was perhaps other things, which we'll discuss later, that put that target on his back. But I think Jason was really the only one on that Zamba tribe that was going to put his hand up. And I don't think it disadvantages him anyway, because he's already the leader. He's already shown that he's able to lead the tribe. And I think if you asked anyone who should do the fire making challenge, everyone would have said Jason. So he just has to go along with that. And I think that the Zamba tribe, they seem like a cohesive enough unit where if Jason didn't succeed, he wouldn't get any backlash really. And he didn't. Whereas I feel like if someone like a Teresa or a Kihan or a Sean put their hand up and said, yeah, let me go, I know how to make fire, let me go for it, and then they came back to camp empty-handed, then people would start asking questions. But I think because Jason was already in the driver's seat there, people were more receptive and understanding of the fact that he obviously didn't win that fire-making challenge, and they respected that he put in his effort, and he did try for the tribe. Whereas when Chappies came back to camp, though, yeah, as I said, Tyson putting back on him and saying, well, Immunity Island is the twist here. What else was up for grabs? Surely it couldn't just be fire. I mean, really, it was just fire. Other than this really exciting twist, I thought, the diplomatic immunity twist there, which grants the holder the opportunity to switch tribe whenever they want, really mutiny whenever they want.
Can I just say,
merge,
Riley,
which is exciting.
Can I just say, when that happened, I was literally fist pumping, saying, man, I called it in our preseason. We spoke about it in the preseason, and we said, what would be a great twist for them to bring into the season? And I think I might have mentioned it before, and then we sort of explored a little bit around it, but we both said that, having a mutiny twist of some sort could be quite interesting, because it's something that we haven't seen very often in Survivor, but I feel like it's an underappreciated twist. So the Survivor producers took that and they thought, how can we add to the mutiny twist and make it even more interesting by giving them diplomatic immunity, which basically means that they can play that after the immunity challenge has been won by a specific tribe at any stage in the game, pre-merge, and they can jump into the other tribe moving forward. Now, the ultimate case here, Riley, if you were to get the diplomatic immunity, is to keep it as long as you can, to wait for a tribe swap to happen, and if you don't land on the numbers on that tribe swap, you then use diplomatic immunity to go back to your alliance on the other side. So that is what I want to see. Obviously, we've only got one person left in the game that's got it now, which is Chappies. And I also am happy that Chappies is the person who's got it, because I also think that Chappies is one of the people that is the most likely to actually use it, because he seems like someone who wants to play big moves. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's Dino that later on in the game there, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we'll come back after this, that says he's willing to make big moves. They might not be the right moves, but at least he's making some, and he's willing to play a big game. Chappies is someone that is obviously very well ingratiated in his tribe, and I apologize there. I said Tyson put out the skepticism. It was actually Mike, I think, who pushed back on Chappies there. But I think ultimately it's a zero-sum game for Chappies. I don't think he's really going to be disadvantaged too much by Mike questioning whether there are idols out there and whether he actually got an individual advantage from that. I do think it benefits someone like Chappies who can play a low game, and if the tribe swap shakes out to the point where he finds himself on the bottom and there's loyal tribe members like a Panti or a Nesu on the other side, he can obviously flip there at any stage. It's something I really like. It adds a lot more dynamics to the season, and again we'll touch on Immunity Island later as well. I'm really glad that production really made a conscious effort to make sure that it wasn't just a linear season, and that there were spikes that could really shake up the game, because last season we saw really one player run in the game from beginning to end. So to add different immunity twists with Immunity Island and the diplomatic immunity, it shakes it up and creates possibilities for, different things to happen in the game.
Yeah, I like anything that puts more power into a player's hands so that you can actually say that person has, if that person goes home and they didn't play it correctly, the power was in their hands to change the course of the game at any point, and it's not an overpowering twist, like in the sense where we said about maybe there should be a mutiny where you can choose when a tribe swap happens, which is pretty powerful, but I think it would be a pretty interesting twist. And who knows, maybe they do bring something like that in, because I've got a feeling they're going to bring in a lot of twists we haven't seen yet. If they're coming in with the diplomatic community right off the bat, I'm sure there's a few other things on the drawing board there that they want to bring in that we haven't seen yet, and I'm definitely here for it. One of the reasons I said, will this put a target on their back, wasn't so much for me with Chappies having a target on his back because he could have gotten something else on the excursion as well. It was more about the fact that we know that in Survivor US, there's a fire-making challenge when it gets to the final 4, going into the final 3, and does that put a target on his back? I know that some people may know about it, some people may not know about it. Survivor South Africa has never done it, but it's just something that if you're a fan of the game, it's in the back of your head. Chappies is someone that can make a fire. He's pretty good at it. He's proficient. Maybe he's someone that we should be careful of. And the other thing that I found quite funny is that Rob Bentele wasn't on this season because he's the fireman. He would have loved to go out there and do a fire challenge, but he sadly didn't get the opportunity to do it in this season. Now, Chappies goes back there to the tribe, to the Vuna tribe, and everybody celebrates. Like you said, very happy that he's won. So again, his stocks has just risen within that tribe, and he goes and celebrates by getting rid of all of his clothes, running into the ocean and having a swim and letting the babies fly. So really love that from Chappies. Love the fact that he's a free spirit. Like I said, the more I see of Chappies throughout this whole season, the happier I'm going to be. He was my number 1 guy pick. Do I think he's going to win this season? It's going to be a miracle if he wins this season, let's be honest, because he is just so out there that his target is massive. And if he wins this season, it would be like a Tony Vlachos Kage level of win. Do I think he's got the same ability as Tony? I don't think he does, but a lot of people called. So I remember listening to RHAP that season when he was playing, and none of them thought that Tony was going to win that season. Everybody thought he was too over the top. So you can never say no to anyone, but I would be very surprised if he actually makes a run all the way through in this season and he actually wins it at this point. So he's at an all-time high. I'm hoping he makes it long in the game, hopefully the merge, because I do think we're going to see some sparks fly as long as he's there. Now, the immunity challenge here is the next thing. And we heard in the preseason, Riley, that production said that they were going to go bigger with all of their challenges moving forward. And the fact that they were doing this in South Africa meant that they had more resources at their disposal. It was easier for them to build and do things like they did. And by the way, the production quality throughout this whole episode, the camera work, the creativity that goes into the idol itself, beautiful tribal idol, immunity idol. Love it. The wooden carved snake with a skull, which is the theme, and the torches itself look beautiful with the skull and then the snake on it. And then also I thought the voting urn is probably the best looking voting urn that I've actually seen in any Survivor season. I'll put it out there. The big skull with the snake going through it. I thought it was just beautifully crafted. So clearly some of that local resources coming into play here, Riley, where they can tap into it, has helped them put on a really good show. And I felt like in this first team immunity challenge, definitely they didn't disappoint, because this is probably one of the biggest immunity challenges just in the sheer stature of what they built that we've ever seen on any of the Survivor South Africa seasons, right?
Yeah, something that shocked me was that Jason really struggled early on in that challenge. I mean, it did involve a lot, obviously running out down the ramp, swimming to the buoys, untying the ropes, and then coming back. But when Jason was running back, he collapsed to the ground. He was really, really struggling there, which shocked me, because going into the season, it looked like he was going to be this Aussie or this Joe type who was really dominant in the challenges, but he struggled there early on, which was a little bit disappointing. And that did make Zamba lose their lid a little bit. But I love that there's so many moving parts in this challenge. Obviously, the relay race, running through the water, then coming back, building the rope ladder, building 2 rope ladders rather, and then the puzzle at the end. So there's so many moving parts, and I guess opportunities for people to come back in this challenge if they obviously fall behind. There's plenty of opportunities, and it favored a tribe like Vuna. It really was a neck and neck this whole time, perhaps from Jason stumbling at the beginning. But both tribes were really neck and neck almost the whole time, really up until that final puzzle.
Yeah, I'm going to call out someone in my draft pick here a little bit for losing a lot of the Vuna momentum that they had going into the rope ladder climbs as they went up, and it was Santoni. She really, or Santoni, I believe is the right way to pronounce it. Santoni really struggled going up there, and I felt like that's kind of what allowed the Zumba tribe to catch up from behind. And the Zumba tribe actually goes into the puzzle with a bit of a lead here when they go into the puzzle, and they've got Amy and Teriso, who will be the two people here on the puzzle who needs to put the puzzle together. But Anesu, and help me out here, who was the person who helped Anesu on the puzzle? Carla. So Nesu and Carla, they absolutely blew it out of the water. But the real big difference for me here, Riley, between the two sort of teams when they were building the puzzle, and we see this all the time in Survivor, is that on the Zumba tribe, you had everybody screaming at the puzzle builders saying, do this, do that, no, take that out. But on the Vuna tribe, they actually trusted their puzzle builders to do what they needed to do. And I find that Sean being one of those people who shouted instructions from the back at the people building the puzzle and actually confusing Amy and trying to put it together. I don't think that is the strategy here, but we get a big bombshell moment here. You know, Dino, fair enough, forgive him about the fact that he went out there and he got the hidden immunity idol, or the immunity necklace in the beginning of the show, because you can recover from that. And I thought he did pretty well up until this point. Clearly, Dino is a really big fan. You know, he's seen the David Gannat, you know, sort of giving an idol to someone in another tribe. He's a fan of David Gannat and Luke Toki and all these guys. He's thinking here, what big move can I have? He's getting greedy. You know, he's already got an immunity necklace going into this first tribal council, which means he's safe, but he doesn't want just that. He also wants to be sent to the immunity island so that he can get an additional advantage for further in the game. And he tries to talk to Paul here. And you know what they say about assumptions, Riley? It's early in the season. Both me and you saw Paul have almost no pull on that Vuna tribe. He's not the guy you want to talk to about doing this. And he's just picking Paul because he's like, oh, I had this quick vibe with Paul. I showed him where to go get the necklace so I can try and get Paul to help me. I feel like that's such a slippery slope to assume that Paul is the guy in that tribe who's got all the clout and who's the person who's going to be able to pull them to actually get Dino to go to the immunity island. So love you, Dino. I know you're going to be listening to this. You know, you're an awesome guy, but definitely, and I think you'll admit it yourself as well, you overplayed your hand so bad here in the beginning. And even though you're not in my team, I want you to do well and go deep in this game. And I'm hoping that you learn from this experience early on here, because to me, it was just one bad move after another bad move. And Riley, how do you feel about that number one pick at the moment?
I mean, Dino was never on the bottom, so he didn't really need to scramble that much. He had this strong 7 alliance, so I don't understand why he went to Paul. But I did find it quite funny how obviously Dino got caught red-handed, mouthing to Paul there by Sean. And then when Vuna are deliberating on who they send to Immunity Island, everyone is in this huddle. The 9 people are in the huddle, and Paul's on the outsides, which again speaks to the alliance. But it also shows that, he is not in that leadership sort of role. It almost seemed like he didn't have any contribution to that at all. Probably a better thing for Paul to know that Dino trusts him from that 2 seconds at the opening reward challenge. But for Dino, it's a bad look. And when he comes back to camp, he makes probably an even bigger misstep, I think. I don't blame him for it, but it certainly doesn't look good on him when he comes back to camp and straight away says that, sorry, guys, I know you all saw me talking to Paul. And then Sean says to Dino that, well, I was the only one that saw it. You know, why you didn't have to tell everyone. You could have just kept it to yourself because, you know, no one else saw it. So who cares? You just painted an even bigger target on your back, which I think makes people a little bit distrusting of Dino there.
Yeah, I think what Dino thought, and I'll go in defense, like I'm 50-50 on that. I see how it's like, firstly, he shouldn't have done what he's done, so he's put himself in a bad spot. But it does remind me of Tony, again, sorry to bring the best player that ever played Survivor up in this conversation more than once. But you know, when Tony whenever he made his moves, he always went back to apologize after he made those moves, you know, in regards to why he did it. I do think that in some ways, Dino going there and saying, listen, this is what I did, he takes the power away from Sean to be able to use that against him to try and paint a target on Dino's back. But Dino was never going to go home in this first episode. So probably the right thing would have been not to tell everybody that inside of the camp, but to go and tell his alliance separately, to go talk to Amy, Marisha, Nicole, Renier, whoever else he's got in that tight 6 or 7, talk to them separately about that move and explain, this is what I tried to do, and I was going to use it as a tribal advantage like they did in Survivor Island of Secrets, because it seems like in South Africa, a lot of people trust the tribal advantages or the tribal hidden immunity idol. So try and use that spin if you can. But it's hard, it all happened that fast. It's playing out live in front of you. I'm sure Dino seemed like he was really panicky for me in these first couple of days in the show, and it's interesting because and again, we're seeing it from the outside. Let's not forget he's inside of the fishbowl. He could be thinking everybody's lying to him, but it looked like he was in a pretty dominant position, and he just tried everything to tank his game from where he was sitting in that dominant position by doing a lot of things that he shouldn't have done or working that little bit too hard here. But talking about tanking a game here, Riley, someone else who up until this point looked like they were trusted by everyone. They're getting him out to go and do the fire challenge. He's building the shelter. He seems to be connecting with a lot of people. He goes here and he pulls Anela aside because somewhere in between all of this, he's created the Blade Brothers with Sean, right? And him and Sean, he feels like he'd rather work with the devil he knows than work with the people on the other side, which is the girl alliance that is starting to form. And he seems really threatened by Amy, Marisha, and Nicole together here. Now, hear me out here, Riley. I understand that it was the wrong move to change it up because clearly Renier was never going to go for it. And Renier was the one who really sunk him here and went back to the girls to turn the vote around on him. The one thing, though, that did make sense to me when I watched this again was when Jason was talking, he's saying to Anela, don't forget that Nicole, Marisha, and Amy, they're seeing weakness or vulnerability in Dino currently, and they're going to use that to their advantage, which means they're pulling another. It's probably too early to think about this because, they're not at the final 7 yet, but he's worried here that that's a very strong 4 within a 7. And that's why he wanted to cut someone like an Amy, for instance, who was very observant and who pulled a target onto Sean. Also listen to the exit interview because he goes into a little bit of why he wanted to work with Sean. And I don't think that his logic is completely flawed, but I do feel like he made this move a little bit too early here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a bit of a misstep for Jason there. He really was coming across as a very dominating force. Which going into the first tribal council, you don't want that because that could put a target on your back. And really, I think he recognized Sean as being someone that, was obviously on the bottom. He didn't have an alliance. So he was someone that he could work with and trust in the game. Whereas I don't think Jason built that relationship with Amy and really wanted to push that back against her to perhaps eliminate Dino as being a bigger threat and sort of lessen his power a little bit. It really did seem like a power struggle. Jason almost, even though he was the leader of the tribe, he did seem to be, at least from my view, a little bit threatened by the others in this tribe. And yeah, he goes to, I think he goes to Renier first and suggests, or it might be Smash, and say that we need to get Amy out. We need to get Amy out, and Smash is just not buying it at all. He says, well, we've already got this alliance. Why would we tamper with it right now? It's only day 3. We really need to, just stick strong as a unit and just go with what we said. Don't complicate things. Just, we can look at things at the next tribal council, which from my perspective, that's a very rational way to be looking at it. Just, stick with things as they are. Why muddy the waters right now? Because, it's just going to create complications down the line, and it's going to view you as untrustworthy. You obviously want to create trust in these early days and not break it. So for Jason, I think that was a massive misstep there. Although he feels like he can trust Smash, I think that Smash ultimately felt more assured in his relationship with the girls, Dino and Renier, safety in numbers, as opposed to putting his faith fully in Jason and just diving into bed with him and thinking that that's the best way forward.
Yeah, and also let's not forget here, Renier sort of talks to it and he says that I can afford unpredictability in my life, just not in the game of Survivor. And him and Jason having this conversation about which way they should go with the vote, it becomes clear to Renier that Jason's got his own agenda here, and Jason is fighting this fight to try and keep Sean. But the crazy thing is that Sean was never going to be the main target. The girls were targeting Kihan, and Kihan wasn't surely that important to Jason. So he was trying to push back here where he should have just given, because losing Keon should have been like water off his back. He still keeps Sean on the side, and he can still try and work with Sean in the future, which is kind of interesting. It does bring us to one of the funniest scenes in this episode, though, and it had me laughing. And I can tell you there's GIFs all over the place on Twitter at the moment on this, and it is the it is that one. The pointing of 5 times to Jason while Dino, Jason, and Rhaenyra are talking. And he nearly gets caught like 2 or 3 times there by Jason looking around while he's doing it. But it is a legendary move. It is really funny. And I think those GIFs will be out on the internet forever.
Oh, so great. I mean, coming into the preseason, and I do apologize, Rhaenyra, I wasn't as high on you, but I mean, watching him play this early on, he seems like such a physical threat, for one. He seems very strong in the challenges. And he does seem very level-headed. I thought he would be very lambastic, very eager to play. And I suppose Dino has perhaps taken that role off him there. Yeah. But Rhaenyra does seem very level-headed. He seems involved in a lot of alliances. His alliance with Smash is assured there. I mean, Jason seems to trust him implicitly. And then again, he also has that connection with Dino and the girls as well. So he seems to be in a very good standing in the tribe. So hilarious from Rhaenyra there. Such a great move. So entertaining to see. We've never seen it before in Survivor. But I just love how he played it. It was just brilliant to see that, obviously Jason was presenting this plan to Dino. Rhaenyra was standing behind Jason and really, pointing at him the whole time. Such a classic moment. I think that'll go down in history as one of the greatest moments in Survivor South Africa, surely. It's just so hilarious to see that, he really was, while Jason was talking to Dino, saying that, no, Jason can't be trusted, don't trust him at all. Such a hilarious move, I thought.
Yeah, and let's not forget this whole move to get Jason out, I feel like is Rhaenyra's move, because Rhaenyra was the one who decided, absolutely, no, it's not going this way. I'm putting the plan in motion. And he had to use a lot of social capital to get everybody on board with moving on Jason and voting him out ultimately at this stage. So that's really good. And I mean, I just wanted to touch on here before we go into the tribal council section. There is also that scene which was quite heartwarming between Sean and Kehan, where they kind of realized that the vote is probably going to come their way. And Sean says that, it's probably going to be me. If I had an idol, we could probably escape this vote and stay for a bit longer. And Kehan breaks down because she's not ready to go home yet. And my heart goes out for her in that moment because she's a fan. I know that she's someone that has gone to the Survivor reunion shows before. I've seen photos of her with other survivors and things like that. I've seen a photo with her and one of her current castmates, which I don't want to go into too much because I didn't really see much of a relationship between them, but they kind of know who both of them are. They know each other. But in any case, so it was really sad to see her sort of being down and out. But Sean here taking the moment to console her and say to her, don't show any weakness. I really like this unlikely alliance that is formed between Kehan and Sean. And I always like the underdog. So for me, I'm quite stubborn like that. I'm wanting Kehan and Sean to dig their way out of the bottom here and find a way to stay in the game for a little bit longer. And one of the other things that I didn't know prior to the season is that Sean has got a necklace on with like a little pink necklace. I can't remember what it exactly says on it, but that was one of his dogs that passed away just before coming onto the show. It's a necklace of remembrance that he's brought into the show, and just showing a different side to Sean. Like, yes, he is this harsh guy. He's a business owner, someone that's used to getting his way. But I do think that we've got to remember as viewers that these people are complex and they're not one-dimensional. And I think he's actually a really nice guy. But this whole episode, he's been going at it with his back up against the wall. And he even says this here prior to going into tribal council. He says that I'm going to have to cause chaos. I'm going to have to try and move the target off me. And I don't blame him for it, Riley, because if you think you're going home, you might as well go out with a bang and get some screen time.
Absolutely. And one thing before we dive into tribal council that we haven't touched on is Immunity Island. Obviously, Teresa, after the challenge, was sent there. And we discussed this in the preseason, that there will be dilemmas. And I thought this was great with Immunity Island is that Teresa was presented with the option that she could either stay and play or give up and go. If she gives up and goes, she goes back to camp rather, and has an opportunity to integrate with the tribe, but obviously she has to give up that time on Immunity Island. Whereas stay and play, she gets the opportunity to play a game, which could obviously get her an advantage. But then if she loses, it can also give her a disadvantage. And we see that obviously Teriso takes the option to stay and play here, which I think is the right option. If you're going to be playing, Survivor Immunity Island, you got to go all in, I think, especially this early on in the game when Teriso doesn't have an alliance in the game yet. And I think people will be understanding if she loses her vote there, which ultimately she does. I don't think it's too big of a disadvantage for her, at least in the first tribal council where it's going to put her out of the game.
No, I think it's 100% the right move. I did quite like the shout out to Winners at War with the bequeath part in the game there. I know some people were like, why did they bring that word into Survivor South Africa? And Leroux Botha tweeted back at the person who was complaining. There's always got to be one person, right, that's going to complain about something like that. And he said there was a very subtle shout out to Winners at War because at the end of the day, he is still a fan of the show. And I don't have a big problem with that being in there at all. I found it quite interesting that should she walk, she still keeps that immunity idol, but she can't play it on herself. She's got to give it to someone else, which to me, that's a non-option. That's an absolute non-option. Like, you got to stay, you got to try and get the safety. Like you said, having no vote in that specific tribal council didn't really matter so much. She was
especially the first tribal council where you haven't built those alliances at all. And someone like Teriso was really the only one without a solid alliance, at least from what we saw. So if she went into tribal council without that immunity necklace, while I certainly think it gives her the opportunity to build a bond, and actually in this case, had she given up and went back to camp and given that immunity necklace to someone else, I think it would have benefited her because, I mean, the target was already on Jason. But I think, early on in the game, it's too risky, especially when you don't have someone you can trust back at camp, not to play that game. And, that immunity necklace gives you at least one vote safe, which I think for Teriso was something that she was really thankful for. And she did say early on that she owed Vuna one because they ultimately saved her ass in this game.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting because, and it's going to be interesting to see if that actually comes into play later on and if Teriso is going to want to work with Vuna, because that's one of the big problems that I'm seeing with the current Zamba tribe is that they're clearly a divided tribe, and that if you're in the majority alliance, they're not even communicating with Sean, they're not communicating with Kian, they're not communicating with Teriso. At some point, you've got to think that one or maybe two of these players are going to make it to a swap. And if you end up on a swap with some of these players, how likely are they going to be to want to work with you if you haven't even communicated to them prior to making that swap? So I feel like there's some danger there where in the Vuna tribe, it does seem like, yes, at some point people might, like an Anesu, for instance, or a Kiran, they might get caught out for forming so many different alliances, but at least they're talking to everyone. So people feel like they've got it in there. So if Anesu or a Chappies or a Kiran, if they end up on a different tribe, they'll probably still be able to work together with different people. Where I feel like Zamba, there's going to be some difficulty there if a tribe swap happens with how divided this tribe is at the moment. And, Sean here in the tribal council mentions that it doesn't matter. It didn't matter if Teriso didn't end up going to Immunity Island, that, he would have gone in any case. And, again, sort of to plug the exit interview here, when I talked to Jason about this, Jason also had a very clear picture of what would have happened if Teriso didn't go to Immunity Island, and he thought this is how things would have played out. So go and listen to that to find out what he thinks. But ultimately, I think that Teriso, she could have been an early target, but now she gets the benefit of surviving the first tribal council. She's not going to be the first person out, but like she said, she's going to be able to sit on the sidelines. Even though she's not voting, she can see where people are sitting and where the alliances are and where the voting dynamics are. So it's a very big advantage for her going into the next round when she needs to maneuver and work her way into some of these alliances. Let's not forget, like Nico said, you're trusting people at the moment that you've only known for 3 days, and alliances formed on day one, at some point they break, and at some point you've got to be able to pivot and adapt and go in different directions. So it might not be that the dominant alliance right now is going to be the alliance that is actually going to run the game and go all the way through this game. I think we spoke about Anela also bringing it to Sean's awareness why he was being targeted, because Sean throughout this whole tribal council is very defensive in regards to the fact that, hey, people are coming at me, they're not even talking to me, they're not giving me the benefit of the doubt. One of the strongest cases he made, and I think that it's a valid case, is that you need numbers going into a merge, and by voting me out, you are weakening the tribe, which I did see Amy roll her eyes slightly at that answer, but it is some truth. There's some truth to it. Like, Sean's got a lot of physicality, and
On both
especially
ends.
now. Sorry?
There's truth on both ends. I mean, Amy
Oh,
obviously
yeah, for sure.
wants to make sure that her alliance is completely trustworthy. You want to build those strong social bonds earlier in the game. But then again, Sean does rightfully point out that, yes, you do want to be winning challenges earlier in the game, because ultimately, I mean, if you keep going back to Tribal Council and voting out the strongest members, then you're ultimately going to, lose more members and eat into those numbers that you're ultimately thinking you're keeping safe. So I think you do need to be flexible, but someone like Sean, he really came into this Tribal Council really ready to go, fired up. He was a one-man show and really just making sure that everyone knew what was going on. And I found it bizarre that he almost seemed willing to go. I'm not sure how he wasn't tapped in with the Jason blindside, so he was trying to shift the target off of Kihan, but at the same time putting the target on himself. So I didn't understand what his strategy was there.
Yeah, I think what he was trying to do, in my opinion, is he was trying to deflect off him by saying things like, "It's crazy that you guys are going against me. You're not trusting me. You're saying that I've got an idol that you asked to look through my bag," which no one was going to tell him. If he's got an idol, the last thing you want to do is let him know that you're onto him, because then he's going to play it. So it's a little bit of catch-22, isn't it? But at the end of the day, when you look at where Sean was sitting in this game, he was trying to make the case for his physicality, being in the tribe, helping them to win challenges. And if you lose him this early on, you lose someone that can contribute a lot to the camp life. Like you said, he does a lot in camp. He's physically strong. I think that's kind of the case that he made. But I agree with you. I didn't get who he was trying to deflect the target on, because it was always going to be either him or Kian in his mind. So if he defends himself, Kian is most likely to take the hit on the side if he actually stays. And I do think he actually ends up voting for Kian as well. I'll have to go and recheck that
he does.
to see where is. Yeah, so he probably tried to deflect it off himself and just try to stay, because at the end of the day, you're mates with everyone until the day that is between you and your mate, and then you've got to deflect it to the other person. One of the things that for me is going to be interesting, Riley, going into this next episode, is that they do lose Jason here. So Jason, being one of the guys that we thought was going to be a challenge person for them in that tribe now, this only leaves Dino, Sean, Renir, and Nanella there. So I feel like Sean is becoming more important to this tribe now from a physicality standpoint by losing Jason. And that's why I'm not willing to say, because I've heard the fan reception and I've had people messaging me, and I said, I'm not going to give any of my opinions prior to doing this podcast, and I'll talk to you about it afterwards, because I don't want to be influenced. But some people are thinking that Sean is the next person to go. I don't think Sean is next to go in this tribe. Like, unless he continues to go at that level of 120% that he was at in this episode, which already in the preview for the next episode, it looks like he's toning it back down. I don't think he should be the next person to go. I think that they would keep him around a little bit. And I think Sean is the kind of player, if you keep him long enough in the game, he's shown a willingness to look for idols and do different things. I think he may find a way to squeak in a little bit longer than what people think.
Yeah, I think Sean is certainly someone that can be stronger in the game, and he can build that trust with, I think, people like Smash and Ranier, who are willing to play a bigger game. And obviously, it's only been 3 days, so we don't know. These alliances aren't set at this stage. So there are opportunities, obviously, to shake things up. One thing I want to touch on is Ranier. Obviously, we mentioned earlier in the episode that he was very perceptive when it came to finding that tribal advantage. And when it came to vote, he lifted up the lid of the voting urn and really had a good look to see if there was an idol underneath there. So, I mean, obviously, Ranier really playing in the game right now and trying to recognize what potential advantages could there be out there. And I mean, we saw it in Survivor Island of Secrets the last season, that there was an idol hidden under the urn. So he was certainly thinking that, maybe there's idols around here. And I think he's certainly playing a very active and perceptive game at this point.
No, 100%. Sorry, I was just coughing there. Luckily, got it on mute. But so 100%. I think that it's going to be interesting going forward. And the last thing I wanted to touch on here as well is that Dino, Sean quite rightfully points out the fact that Dino absolutely overplayed it, and still people are not looking at him as a target. And he's putting an even bigger target here on Dino in this section of the tribal council as well. But ultimately, it's going to be a blindside. And Jason will be the person that is going to go home here, and he's going to become, sadly, the first person voted out. And listen, if you told me to choose 10 times who I think was going to be the first person evicted in Survivor Immunity Island, I didn't think it was going to be Jason. I understand why he went home. I understand that he overplayed his hand badly, and that he was seen as too much of a wild card. And if you see the exit interview, you can see he's a bundle of energy. So I'm sure that was the same thing out there on the island as well. But really, at the end of the day, in a different season, it might have worked. If he was there with different people, they might have gone with him. Didn't work this season. He didn't read it correctly. He definitely didn't read Renier correctly. I think Renier was, at the end of the day, the person who was his downfall. But let's have a look here at the teams going into this one. And Riley, you're someone that should be really happy about this, because you're going to take an early lead with my second guy pick here being eliminated in the bracket. And it's a good start for you. How are you feeling about your team currently? If you had to choose a player in your team that you think performed the best for this specific episode, who would be that person? And if you had to choose someone for the whole episode on both teams, who do you think is that person on your side that you think has played the best game so far?
Yes, I think certainly in terms of looking at the Vuna tribe, the two strongest players there at the moment seem to be Anesu and Kieran. So Kieran from my team is probably the one that's looking the best at this stage, although even someone like Wadler and Tyson, who I may have picked last on my tribe, I feel like they've done a really good job at ingratiating themselves and creating those strong alliances. But for me, the best performance in this episode, it has to go to Renier, dominating the challenge, and obviously, create that blindside out of nowhere, to have that trust with that strong 6 alliance, and really create a blindside out of thin air of one of the strongest players in the game. I think he did a great job. I know I talked very harshly of Renier early on in the season there, and thought that he might be a little bit of a Jacob Derwin, but he has proved himself to be very level-headed and also willing to make big moves, but he doesn't seem too bombastic as well in doing so. So he's certainly played his hand very well there, I think. And Renier for me at the moment, he is at the top of my power rankings right now.
Yeah, and if I had to look at my team, I agree with you. If I had to look at both tribes, I think that it's hard to choose the best player overall, because both tribes are playing a different game at this stage until they merge. I do think Renier needs to be given respect for the move that he pulled off, and he seems to be a fan that is extremely capable at this stage, like you've just mentioned, for all the reasons that you've mentioned. I also want to give a shout out to Amy in that specific tribe. Amy had a very good behind the scenes game, and I think that Amy is extremely well ingrained within that 3-girl power structure there with Nicole and Marisha. I think that she's someone that can go quite deep. I'm hoping that Sean doesn't find out that she was the one who outed him, because if that happens, then she is going to be in danger, I think, in the next episode. It's quite funny now that I look at it, quite a few of those tribe members are here in my team together. I also think that Anesu, I feel like my read on her early season was right. I feel justified for having picked her this high. I know there were some questions about why I picked her this high. I think that she's got good energy. I think that she's going to be extremely strategic. The one fear I have for her is that people start using the whole doctor thing against her, but I don't think it's going to be a short-term thing. I think that could be something that becomes an issue after merge when it's a later game. So it'll be interesting to see if she can ride the wave of having so many different people. And I also want to give a shout out to someone that, we left him quite late here, similar to Tyson. Let's give a shout out to Smash. Smash, you had a really good first episode if you're listening to this. We thought you might be like a Felix type of character, and I can see I've completely misjudged you. You seem to be someone that is extremely socially aware, and you adapt to the people around you. And everybody, all the girls trusted him. Like, he was the one person that they kept saying, we trust Smash. Smash is the person we're going to work with. So he's doing a really good job so far. But if I had to choose one player currently, you'd have to give it to Renier, because Renier was the one who kind of dominated the strategy this episode with getting the ultimate person Jason voted out. And also so many players that are impressing me. Like Kiran, you're doing a good job. At the end of the day, I feel like we've got a season full of gamers here, Riley, and I feel like that's why someone like Jason went as early, because if there was less gamers this season, he might have been able to pull off what he tried to pull off, but there's too many people that are smart and are playing at a different level coming into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do just want to say that Dino, my first pick, I'm still riding on him as the winner pick. But as he said in the episode, he had more moves than a drunk white boy in a club. But ultimately they were pretty bad moves there. So a little bit of a misstep. But I feel like his position in the tribe with people like Amy is assured at the moment. And I think, yeah, Amy is certainly one of the strongest females on the board here right now. She really does seem to have the trust of Nicole and Marisha. But certainly, I don't think there's any obvious target on either tribe going into the next episode. It's still very early in the game. So to see how people adjust will be really interesting. I think Santini, probably just because we haven't seen her form in too many alliances on the Vuna tribe, is someone that I see as being a potential early target there. And obviously, as we mentioned, Sean and Kihan not integrating themselves on the Zamba tribe as well. But ultimately, it's so early in the game. And as we mentioned before, Immunity Island is in play. There's so many different twists here that could affect the way the game plays out. So yeah, next week, I'm really excited to get back into it. I'm so glad, Chris, that Survivor is back. And yeah, everything was exceeded in terms of my expectations with Immunity Island here. The twist is so good. The production quality as well is fantastic. I thought one thing I took away from the episode, particularly in Tribal Council, was all the different camera angles as well. It really felt like you were a part of the Tribal Council, which I thought was really great and something we haven't seen before. But I'm really glad that LaRue Bota and the production team on Survivor South Africa are taking the opportunity to create different twists, which is something that I really like. And it does seem like a very dynamic game. And the cast here is so much fun. So yeah, can't wait for next week, Chris.
Yeah, and they're taking the chance to create new and creative twists without it being overpowering to the sense of it's going to change the complete game. It's not game-changing twists. It's just enough for people that are at the bottom to scramble back to the top and keep the game interesting, which is what I enjoy. There's a fine balance that you have to walk when you bring these twists into the game. I also just wanted to touch on you being so confident on Dino. I think it's early to call a winner this early on, but I'm going to put it out there. I've got a feeling that there could be a female winner this season. I just have this feeling that a lot of the guys are going to play out in the front, and some of the females that are playing in the back end. I feel like it's time to see a female winner in Survivor South Africa. I think there's a couple of I was very impressed by the likes of Nicole, Anesu, Amy, Marisha, Pinty even seemed like she's quite capable. Carla
as well,
who we didn't see much. Yeah, so I mean, and Warda, it's almost all the females there that I've just mentioned. There's so many really strong female characters that I do think that we could see a female win this season. Now, guys, if you've gotten up until this point of the show, we thank you for watching. It's been great having you here. We will be back next week to talk about episode 2, and we will be joined by a Survivor South Africa season 6 alumni to do the recap as well. So stay tuned to find out who that person is going to be who will be joining us to talk about Survivor South Africa in episode 2. But we're both very excited about that. And I do think this person might know a few of these people a little bit, so they might give us some tidbits and some insights onto how these people would potentially play a game such as this. Now, tomorrow, we've also got the exit interview that will be dropping with Jason. I had so much fun, Riley, talking to Jason. He's got so much energy. He is extremely positive. He took a lot of positivity away from playing the game, and even though he was voted out first, it hasn't crushed his soul, which I'm glad to see, because I do think as a fan of the show, it can sometimes be really soul-crushing when you go out there and finally get to play the game, and then you don't make it as far as you want to. But ultimately, I think the one thing I've learned from this, watching so many fans go out there and play it, at the end of the day, only one person wins, and someone has to be the first person to vote it out. And sadly, this season, it was Jason. Riley, what have you got going on your channel over on YouTube on Snuffed?
Yeah, we're continuing our journey of the winners of the US Survivor. Obviously, next week we'll be up to Earl Cole, the winner of Survivor Fiji, also discussing plenty of other general discussion. I'll also have a casting video coming up, recasting Survivor Micronesia as All-Stars 2. So plenty of content over there on Snuffed on YouTube.
Yep, and if you like this content over here on Reality Pop, guys, please be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, I've got on our description Riley's YouTube channel and also my Instagram and Twitter. I'm probably the most active on Twitter. I'm trying to get to know how Twitter works at this stage, but I'll be tweeting out whenever we go live, so you guys know that the show is going to be going live. But normally we'll try and keep it around the same time, unless we've got guests from South Africa, because this is like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning their time. We might have to switch it up for those specific instances. But we'll be back next week to talk about the greatest show on television. And until then, goodbye and thanks for watching.